Welcome to our Destination Rural podcast series. I'm Peter Rutherford. I'm the CEO of the Rural Doctors Association of Australia. For those that are regular listeners, welcome back after a small break. And today we're going to try something new. I'm actually interviewing two doctors from up in the Kimberley region of WA, Dr. Brit Wicksteed and Corey Rosher. So looking forward to having a chat with them. They're early in their career and have some amazing experiences to share. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Hi, Brit. Hi, Corey. Thanks for joining us on our Destination Rural podcast series. I'm really excited to talk to a couple of up-and-coming doctors in WA. WA seems to be the place to be these days. I'd really like to just kick off with just asking each of you, tell me a little bit about who you are, where you're currently working, and a little bit about where you're from, and maybe a bit about your family as to what sort of led you to rural medicine. So, Brit, I might start with you if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having us, Peter. I'm an RMO, so PGY3 this year, working up in the Kimberley. I've been based in Broome all year, but I'm lucky enough to be in Connemara at the moment and having a pretty fun time. Since I've finished uni, I've been working rurally, so down in Albany and the Great Southern for 2 years before coming up to the Kimberley. I'm from the country myself. I grew up half in the goldfields and half in the wheat belt, and I never really thought when I started uni that I would end up back in the country, but here we are. And I think I have some pretty awesome programs like Ramus and John Flynn and Rural Clinical School to blame that on, but absolutely loving it.
That's great. Corey, what about you?
I, like Brit, am up in the Kimberley, based out of Broome. I've just returned from Kununurra and, like Brit, had an awesome time. I'm originally from the southwest of Western Australia, so Margaret River wine region will ring a bell for most people, which I'm very close and nearby to there. I guess what drew me to rural medicine is more living in the country than anything else. And then I've subsequently, since starting medicine and working in country hospitals, discovered that I also like the country hospital environment that's sort of nurtured and a bit more collegiate and supportive. And also had some exposure to the challenges that comes with it, and sort of really want to advocate for rural patients.
Nice. Corey, have you decided on a career or a training pathway yet, or are you still exploring your options?
Definitely the latter. So for context, I, before getting into medicine, did a pharmacology undergraduate degree and then went on and did my honours. So drugs and medications have always been an interest of mine, and that's kind of manifested itself in medicine as an interest in anaesthesia. And I'm kind of at not really a crossroads, but just trying to work out if I want to do a rural generalism type thing where I do general practice and anaesthetics as a side thing as well, which, is awesome to see in rural areas, particularly like Kimberley, or if I go down the straight anaesthesia path. And I guess I'm not making that decision yet. I'm just trying to get as much exposure to this sort of area of interest as possible.
If you go down anaesthetics, do you see yourself doing some of that rurally, or just heading straight back into city practice?
So my main long-term goal, which I sort of say to everyone, is I want to end up in the country. So whatever I do is going to be that, and then work will fit in around that for me.
And what about for you, Brit? Locked into a training program or a career path?
Yeah, I just found out this week that I've been accepted into ED training, which is great.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. I knew pretty early on that ED was going to be what I wanted to do. And I tried to keep an open mind, but I've just been driven more and more into ED the more experience I get. So I just really like the teamwork aspect, the fast pace, and the variety of conditions that you can see. I really do think it's the best 5 minutes of every specialty, but I also like that you can take that experience to the country. And having worked in Albany in particular, they have a nice hybrid model with FACEMs and GPs working in ED. I think that works really well. So I can definitely see myself back down in the Great Southern working as a FACEM one day, and probably locuming around and seeing the sights of WA as well.
Has your early years in like the more rural settings been a good foundation, do you think, for an ED career? Or, you know, are you getting enough exposure to a variety of emergency type cases that you'd get, say, in Perth? Or, you know, how do you feel in relation to how rural set you up for your ED training and career?
I think it's been a real asset to be rural, because I think one of the criticisms of city EDs is that they become a bit of a glorified triage system, and that the people working in ED don't actually get to do any of the fun procedures. You know, there's subspecialties now that can come and drain the left little toe. So I think working in the country has allowed me to see just how much you can do in an ED, and how much scope there is seeing sick kids, sick adults, trauma, you know, sepsis. There's just a whole range of things you get to do and see. And then you get to be the person intubating them, or putting in the chest tube, or doing the art line or the central line, rather than having to call someone in. So it's been really inspiring, I think, seeing very, very skilled clinicians, both FACEMs and rural generalists, just being so capable to handle whatever comes in the door, and knowing they don't have backup upstairs. It's just them and they just get it done. So I think seeing that and just seeing how capable people can be has been a real inspiration in me wanting to pursue ED.
Corey, what about I guess one of the things when people are working rurally, and there's a lot of, I guess, misconceptions, how have you found sort of like the supervision or the senior clinician support as a junior doctor?
Better, for a single word. I think it suits my personality well, in that it's a lot more informal. So the clinicians that you interact with, you'll often see external of work, and you'll form friendships with. And I think that actually really nurtures a clinical support, so you don't feel uncomfortable asking your seniors silly questions. If they're not on call for a certain thing, you're still happy to talk to them, and they're still happy to come and help as well, because sort of the overall vibe of a rural hospital, or rural hospitals that I've experienced, has been everyone just kind of rolls their sleeves up and works together to get the job done, and that includes with supervision too. So very supportive.
What about your experience, Brit? A similar sort of experience for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think working rurally means that there's a little bit more informality and flattening of the hierarchy, and maybe a little bit more time for the senior clinicians to kind of take you under their wing. And you do kind of get to see that side of them as well. That's not just the scary consultant side, but their personality in kind of outside of work, and you get to meet their families or interact with them at social events, which just gives you, I think, a deeper level of connection in terms of mentorship and help, whatever it is, whether it's a difficult day at work or choosing your clinical path. And in my experience, if they know you're keen on something, even if you're not looking after the patient that needs something done, they'll go and find you and be like, come over and do this full procedure, or, you know, come watch this one, and then the next patient you can do. So I think the bedside teaching and support is much better than, not that I've really worked in the city yet, but much better than I experienced certainly as a medical student or observed with the junior doctors in the city.
Okay.
Yeah,
Corey.
And I would just add to that, I think the awesome thing about working in the smaller type hospitals is people that, you know, supervise you one turn, you'll then be interacting with them from the other side of the admission or whatever it might be. And so you really do have this camaraderie, and sometimes, you know, you'll be admitting patients for the surgical team, and the, you know, ED person will get you to help out with some of the procedures that they're doing. So yeah, I think there's huge scope for getting skills.
I know in Broome you've got a number of consultants, like consultant physicians and surgeons and that on staff. What about in relation to the multidisciplinary teams, like, you know, your allied health staff or, you know, the calibre of nursing? Just, you know, is there a good team environment in that way, or is there shortages in, you know, and other challenges, I guess, within sort of your allied health staff, even maybe your medical staffing as well? Like, how does it all come together, just from your perspective?
I think in some ways it almost mirrors what the medical side of the smaller hospitals are. Everyone's more of a generalist. So your physios, your OTs, you know, we've recently got a full-time podiatrist at Broome who does everything. So I think everyone, again, is more willing to dip their toe in something that they normally, you know, would refer on to someone else in a country hospital. So it is really a multidisciplinary team, and everyone looks out for everyone, and no one's an expert in one thing, but everyone knows a little bit about something.
Yep.
I find that there's similar kind of shortages in the medical team as there is in nursing and allied health. But the nice thing at the end of the day is, even if the teams are short, or, you know, in Kununurra, for example, there's like 2 physios for the whole of the East Kimberley and no private physios at all. Even though their workload is so stretched, and even though they need to be in 5 places at once, they just pour their heart and soul into it, and they do it for the patients in the community. And it's just really nice seeing people, I guess, invested in the health and well-being of the patients in the community, rather than just rocking up to the job and not enjoying it and then going home at the end of the day. It's very passionate, and they're always very willing to help with a big smile on their face, even though they must all be exhausted. So I think it fosters quite a good team environment, because everyone's doing it for the same reasons, and that's ultimately for the patients at the end of the day.
It's really nice to hear. Corey, you touched on really briefly, and you talked about, you know, seeing, you know, some of the senior clinicians outside of work. What are the sorts of things, like, you know, that you get to experience outside of work as a junior doctor? You know, lifestyle, are there sports that you can do, you know, adventures? What happens in, you know, up in that area of WA, and as a junior doctor, that you've sort of got to enjoy that you may not get to enjoy, you know, particularly obviously if you're living in Perth or somewhere else?
I don't know what, it's hard to say what's different, but I would certainly say that Broome and the Kimberley in general are a big sporting town and area. So lots of social sports, mixed netball, basketball, and your teams, whereas previously it'd be your friends from down south that you would make your teams with. Now you're sort of diversifying your friendship circles and getting, you know, the pathologist to fill in on your team, or the consultant to play as well. So I think because of the smaller numbers of people, you actually get a more diverse friendship group as well, from people with people that you would normally potentially not spend time with. Other things like the Kimberley is an amazing outdoorsy place, so the camping and the gorges and everything that you can see here is like, I've had such an eye-opening experience, and for anyone considering going to the Kimberley, I would just say do it. It's awesome.
What about you, Brit, for like personal life and, you know, interests outside of work?
Yeah, I agree with everything Corey said. I think in a way my approach to choosing jobs early on and working rurally was more just so I could have a working holiday that never ended, because without commutes and waiting around for parking and having to do ridiculous amounts of overtime, I have so much time in my day. So that means I can go for a nice walk, go to the beach in Broome, or down to the river here in Kununurra. And there's lots of walks to do and pretty spectacular scenery that is really some of the best kept secrets, I think, particularly in the East Kimberley here. But certainly we've got to do lots of camping this year. And, you know, especially in Kununurra, there's lots of the rural GPs have boats and things like that, and pools at their house. So lots of barbecues, heading out in the boat, and lots of weekends away that I don't think you really get in Perth. When you're in the city, you just do your status quo, you go to work, you rest on the weekends, you might see your mates, but in the Kimberley, you might go up the peninsula camping, you might go stay at one of the Pearl farms like we did earlier in the year, Corey, head on the Gib for a massive adventure. So I think you get to tick off a lot of bucket list items. And because you're only here for a year, 2 year, 3 years, you're much more motivated, I think, to actually get out and see the surrounds rather than just living life day to day and falling into that rhythm. It's been great.
You can not answer this if you don't want to, but a lot of junior doctors or medical students and that often talk about one of the barriers to rural or going rural is the opportunities for their partner. So do either of you have a partner that's with you up there or a partner somewhere else?
My advice is marry a teacher because they're very transportable.
Good advice. I'm sure a town where they can welcome a doctor and a teacher would be, doing it with open arms. What about
Absolutely.
you, Corey?
My partner's also a junior doctor up here, so often our careers in the future and now will be quite transferable to wherever we want to go.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to sort of cross the training pathway bridge together and wherever we both want to go and matching that up. External looking at other people, I think it is a challenge, certainly. I know my uncle, who is a rural generalist from a long time back when he first moved up to Kununurra to work. The hospital was very supportive in helping his wife find work. And I don't know if that happens anymore. But I think, what am I trying to say?
It'd be good if it did.
Yeah, it would be good if it did, but it's hard to just guarantee everything. And sometimes people have to make sacrifices, and it is certainly a sacrifice to move to the country to a certain extent, but it's a sacrifice that I'm definitely willing to make, and I think is a awesome undertaking.
I think though, in kind of COVID times, working from home is much easier and much more acceptable. But I think, as Corey said, it is a bit of sacrifice, but I guess if you do have a partner that's in a different career that maybe isn't so transportable to the country, I think there's always going to be ebbs and flows in terms of who has priority over their career. So I don't think it's a complete deal breaker. And I think people make it work to their situation. And I think in WA, there is some support through organisations like Rural Health West in terms of finding partners of health professionals, opportunities and assistance in upskilling in areas to find jobs locally. But certainly that does remain quite a big challenge for couples.
Yeah, I think too, it's also you need to find a rural town that works for you and your family. So, I mean, and it's an old saying, but it's a good one. You've been to one rural town, you've been to one rural town. So you can, sometimes find a rural town that, that is looking for a mechanic, or probably most of them are for a mechanic, but, accountants, lawyers, whatever it might be. But, sometimes there is some surprising opportunities. But yeah, I'm just interested to hear what your personal experience is and what you observe around you. So thank you for that.
I mean, I have to say, just with Broome at the moment, I know they're short everything. They're short mechanics, they're short hairdressers, they're short bar staff. They're crying.
They're not short of, like they have no rentals and housing. So I think at the moment the housing crisis is probably the biggest issue for anyone who wants to move to the country.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you're right. I think the towns are screaming out for more staff in all areas. So it's probably a really good time to move to the country for people who are considering it with their partner in a different field.
Yeah. So how long, do you see rural medicine being a long-term career, going rural forever, or something that, you'll do for part of your career and, see where the journey takes you, or on a a 5-year plan, I'll go rural, I'll do this, and then I'm out of here. Corey, what are your sort of plans in relation to rural medicine?
It's hard to know. I think the easy default answer is I want to be rural and stay rural. I think inevitably some part of my training will have to be in the city, and I think the year after next I have sort of put in my 5-year plan that I will go back to the city to do some additional training. The other thing that I've found interesting talking with some of the senior docs up here is when children come into the picture. To some degrees, the education opportunities for children are less in some rural communities, and so what some of the doctors do is they, during primary school years, they spend their time in country towns and then go back to the city for high school years, and when their kids have moved out of home, then often they go back to the country. Other people spend all of their careers in the country. Like I know my parents are both vets, so it's a slightly different situation, but they moved to the country when I was born and have stayed there since. I think it's very situation dependent.
What about you, Brit?
I would say that's what boarding schools are for, Corey.
That's a good point. Yeah, you were a boarder, weren't you?
Yeah, and I turned out okay. I think I can see us in the country long term. I think that just suits mine and my husband's personalities and I guess lifestyle goals, because I think that's a lot more important than just work goals alone. We will be going back to Perth next year for a stint of time, so probably kind of 5 years or so to get ED training out of the way. But other than that, I can see us settling down south in Albany most likely. I look at houses like every single day. And if anyone from Albany ED is listening, I am coming to work for you, so keep me a spot open. I think the only thing that would draw me away from the country at this point in time is if I get so fed up with the current politicians that I decide to pursue it myself, which is always a danger, especially the way the current political environment is. But living in the city is good and convenient and has its own good things about it, but it's just not quite as good as living in a country town that you love.
One of the things I do in these podcasts is a little bit of a quick fire round. So I'm going to fire some questions off at you and just say the first thing that pops into your mind.
Do we get buzzers or?
No. Well, you can both answer on each. So, but maybe if I ask and Corey, you go first and Brit, you follow with whatever you think. I'll give you a little bit more time to think about it, but don't think too hard. Just the first thing that pops into your mind. Okay. Best thing about living rural?
Lifestyle.
Scenery.
Okay. Best thing about rural medicine?
Spending time and getting to know your patients.
Sick patients you get to get hands-on with.
Okay. Worst thing about rural medicine?
Distance, lack of resources, and sometimes a lack of understanding of the tertiary centres to the limited resources that you have.
Lack of social workers, pervasive social issues you can't fix, very few places to go shopping.
Oh, I'm so impressed with you two because nearly everyone else says on call. So I'm amazed. Like, you have impressed me no end. Okay. Favorite movie, Corey?
It's coming up to Christmas. Love Actually.
Brit?
Oh, that's such a hard one. Oh my God, I can't even think of a movie right now.
Okay, you can pass. Favorite drink, Corey?
Ooh, at the moment, there is a beer called Guelo. It's a sour beer. I think it's made in Hong Kong or Taiwan or something by some Australian expats. It basically has rainbow sherbety looking can and it tastes like a sherbet.
Oh yeah. Brit?
Gin and tonic.
Okay. Brit educated me in this. Wicksteed, good or bad? Maybe Brit, you answer that one.
I'm very pro.
I think it definitely has its benefits.
We've been propping up the eastern states for too long with our mining resources.
Ooh.
That's such a WA thing to say, Corey.
All right. I probably know what Corey's going to say to this, but anyway, we'll see how we go. Margaret River, Hunter Valley, or Adelaide Hills?
I haven't been to the other two, so Margaret River.
It's more about the wine than anything else. Brit?
I'm going to go for an unlisted option, which is the Great Southern Wines, a very undiscovered and excellent wine region, and Margaret River can be a runner-up.
Fair enough. Okay, Eagles or Dockers?
Dockers. Long-suffering loser that I am.
See, I was always a Dockers fan, but my husband's a very strong Eagles supporter, so I've had to acquiesce to his very intense support of them. So I'll have to say Eagles.
Okay. All right.
Stay strong.
One last
Not worth it, Corey.
One last question. If you could give yourself some advice as you step into your day one of internship, what would it be?
Oh, I think something that I've started to realize as I get further along is there are often problems that get put in front of you that are fairly obviously not your problem with some experience under your belt. And I think as an intern, far too often I tried to solve everything and fix everything. And I often ended up doing the work of whether it was the flow manager or the social worker or whoever it might be. And that's probably held me in good stead for working in a country hospital where you have less of those kind of people. But certainly having awareness of when to handball tasks and escalate to the right person as needed is some advice that I would give. I suppose it's hard to give that advice without having the experience under your belt, though.
Brit, what advice would you give your new intern self?
The first bit would be to back yourself and don't let people intimidate you. And the second bit would be don't be afraid to prescribe insulin as per the insulin chart, because 2 units probably won't kill the patient. So just do it.
Brit and Corey, thank you so much for giving me your time and chatting to me with this podcast. And good luck with your future training endeavours. Thanks,
Peter.
Thank you so much.